Welcome back to Marcelins Podcast, a place where we embrace marks acquired through our journey. My name is Elizabeth Savion, and thank you for joining me on episode 34 of this podcast. Right now, we're in a relationship series, and on this week's episode, I'm actually having a guy on this podcast to talk about all the questions that maybe you have ever asked about guys. And so I'm really excited for this episode, so let's just get right into it. So on today's podcast episode, I am excited because I'm going to have a guy's perspective. And so I have my brother-in-law and my family, Jun Marcelin. Welcome to Marcelins Podcast. You're actually the first guy on this podcast.
Wow. I feel so honored. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, we've been talking about this for a few weeks already. And he was like bugging me, like, when am I going to be on your podcast? And I'm like, eventually.
Oh, is that what happened? Oh, okay. I remember it differently, but okay. I'll let you get that off.
No, but I've actually had, like, this is just a side note, but I actually had guys like be like, hey, it would be cool if I'm like on your podcast. And I'm like, what are you going to be talking about? But I mean, I have guys that listen to my podcast apparently, but it's still something that I know that my main audience is women, and, you know, mental health, a lot of other things. But
just want to say you're doing an amazing job so far, though.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The fam is the number one supporters.
Absolutely.
But for those that don't know you, what are you passionate about? Can you say a little bit about yourself?
I'm passionate about helping people find their purpose. I'm a communicator. I've been married now for 5 years. I just love to just be around people and just have conversations. And so I just love having fun as well. Those are some of the things that I'm, passionate about and like to do.
Yeah, like sports and reading. We have a lot of, well, with the reading, we have similar interests. The sports,
Yes.
not really. But, I really love, over the past few years, you've been someone that I've learned from when it comes to like relationships through the good and the bad. Like you've been open about stuff that you've struggled with, stuff that has happened in your past, things that you have gone through. And even in your marriage, like you've been very transparent with me. And even on your podcast, you've been transparent about stuff that you guys have walked through. So I felt like how I know that about you, and like I know the life that you live, I trust you and your perspective when it comes to relationships. So let's just get right into it when it comes to the questions, because we had some juicy things to talk about today.
Yes, we did. Yes, we do.
When you were looking at the questions, were you like, oh no?
I was like, all right, let's get to it. I mean, I was excited because I think, these are the types of conversations that people want to have, and people don't want any just, cookie cutter answers. People want you to be, real, raw, and authentic. And so I think that's going to be the conversation today. And so when I first got the question, I was like, okay, so this is what the ladies think sometimes of men. And so it was very interesting. And so I'm very excited for this conversation.
Awesome. So let's start from the top of what people were saying about, I did a poll on social media and I actually got a really good response of guys and girls. And so let's go through the questions first. So the first one was, do you think men and women go through the same thing during a breakup? What do you think was the number one answer?
I would assume that the answer was no. They don't think that men and women go through the same in breakups.
Yeah. And so what do you think?
Yeah, I think it is different, but I think it's based on scenarios. You get what I'm saying? I know for me, in my experience, my past experience, when I went through a breakup, it's funny story. So one of the relationships that I was in, I was actually hoping that it would work. And then I happened to be on social media and that individual was getting engaged. And so that was,
oh no.
And so all that hope, matter of fact, I was at the gym. And so all that hope that was there, I literally just went to the car, ripped up the pictures that we had, and I went to the gym for like the next 2 to 3 hours. And I went. And so for me, one of the ways that sometimes guys deal with breakup, and again, I'm not speaking for every guy, but we kind of sometimes just kind of compartmentalize it. We do things such as working out, hang out with the guys just to kind of get our mind off of it. And so that might be different for the ladies, but I know that's one of the things that, that I do personally, that I have done in the past, whenever I've gone through a breakup, just kind of like distract myself, do things that I need to do to just kind of get my mind off of it. And so I do think it is different between guys and girls and how they handle their breakups.
Yeah, and the process. Because I think that the pain, I spoke to someone recently that they said that the pain that guys feel, again, because I've always thought, I'm like, guys literally like live their life and they don't care. But I've learned that that's not they have feelings too, right? You guys cry.
Yes,
You
we do have
guys, you
feelings. Yes,
guys.
we do.
I'm so joking. This might sound like I'm so bitter, but no, I really am just being funny. But I think that because we go, at least from the women's perspective, we go through a breakup and we feel the emotions like head on. Like the first 1 month, like we were like not eating, we're not sleeping, we're crying all the time, everything. Like we can't even like look at anything, we can't hear anything that doesn't remind us about someone. We want to talk to them, we long to like be with them, like that whole process, we're just so like distraught. But the guy's process, if I'm that's what I'm going to ask you, do you think that that process in the beginning, the initial, is different?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's a misconception that, like, it's funny that you say that jokingly, but there are people who really think that guys just don't have any emotions and that they don't do anything. Like, they're just cold. And it's like society would have us to believe. And I know that we're going to talk about that a little later on in the conversation, but the belief is just that like there's no emotion there, that we're just gonna do whatever, just go be with the next girl. And while that might be true for some, it's like, no, I think we just handle it differently. Um, you know, in previous times, in previous decades, it was like, you don't show. I think now we're getting to a point where it's okay for a guy to kind of like show emotion and hey, talk to another guy. But it's interesting though, because it's like when dudes check up on each other, it's so different than when women check up on each other. Like it's literally just like, you good, bro? Like it's not really like, and I'll be the first to admit, like I would be like, whenever I was going through a situation, like I couldn't find myself, it just felt unnatural to open up to another man. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was just unnatural, but that was just kind of like my upbringing. It was just like, if you showed emotion, you cried, it was a sign of weakness. And so I feel like as time has kind of progressed, we're getting past that, which is a good thing. And it's okay for a man to show emotion. It's okay for a man to open up to his friend if he's going through a breakup or dealing with that differently. I think that comes more naturally for a woman
Mm-hmm.
than it does for a guy. And so it's definitely different, very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. But I think that that's kind of going towards like, are guys given the space to like mourn? Like, are guys given the space to grieve in society, which I know, like how you said, we'll talk about a little bit more. But yeah, I think that that was always my thought. It's just like, oh, they're fine. Or like, like they're, a guy's like posting and like, how you said, like working out, like going out with his friends, like doing stuff. And the initial thing is like, well, they don't care. When I know that that's not true. Um,
They
it's
fronting.
like the what?
They're fronting when they
Yeah,
do that.
it's a
Yeah.
front. It's like when you post on social media after a breakup too. Like we all post our cute pics. Like we all
Yeah.
post that
When the girl,
we're
it's
so
interesting because when the girl goes through the breakup, that's when she floods the timeline with pictures, and you just like, whoa, where these pictures come from?
who is
So
this girl?
yeah, so it's kind of like we're doing the same thing, but just going about it differently. The guy's more in the gym, the
Hmm.
girl's just like, with the quotes, the movie quotes, the song quotes. We're doing the same thing, but differently. Like it's weird. It's really weird. It's funny
That's
though.
so interesting perspectives. And something else that I spoke to someone recently that's she's like a dating coach, but she helps with people going through breakups in specific. And she told me something. She's like, I've talked to so many men that actually like it's just because they're not given the space and like they literally don't want to like talk. Like they go through the same like they feel like numbness, because
Yeah.
we're norm it's that's a normal thing. Like you're talking to someone all the time, you have a relationship going on, and then you break that off. Like you already have that what is that called? The routine. So
Mm-hmm.
with anything that feels weird, like you don't just go from one day to the next and like you're like, oh, well, I don't love them. I don't care about them. I don't.
Yeah.
So like that's a very big misconception to think that like we are allowed to feel that way, but then they're not or they
Yeah.
don't.
Think about
So
it when you were a little kid, right? When a girl would fall, dad would go to the girl and say, hey, are you okay? Kiss her, boo boo. You okay? When a boy would fall and scrape his knee, same scenario, you'll be all right. Get up, stop crying. You're a big boy. So
Mm,
that is instilled and drilled in your mind from the time that you're young. Okay, crying means weakness.
mm,
You get what I'm saying? Like, I can't show that I'm hurt because I'm a big boy. And so from the time that you're 5 years old or even younger, you gotta be, you gotta be tough. And so, like you said, like, it's true that space is not given for a man to truly be able to mourn. And the emotional vocabulary for men, that's why it's much more difficult than it is for women, because when you look at the shows, when you look at everything, we're typically just seen as just kind of silent, and we just kind of suppress a lot of things. And then
mm,
that kind of comes out in anger, it comes out in rage. And so
mm.
it's so different.
Yeah. Very good. Very good insight. So let's go to the next question. It was, do you think men should do the pursuing? So a big majority of people actually said yes. And I had my own thoughts on this, but like I want to hear yours.
I don't believe that there's a right or wrong answer to this question.
Okay.
Um, and let me preface this, because I know that there are going to be some girls that listen to this. They're going to be like, I don't agree. And guys probably not going to agree either. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this. I believe every culture is different. You
Mm-hmm.
have some cultures where uh, the guy is the pursuer. And then in some cultures, it's the woman. Again, going back to the conversation prior, it's like, as time has kind of gone by, like, I feel like if a woman sees a guy that she likes, she knows what she wants, girl, shoot your shot. I find nothing wrong with that at all. What difference is it? Because we're encouraging now, like, we're in an era right now of women empowerment. And so we're encouraging women to go after, their dreams, to go after that job for equality. What difference is it in going after someone that you like? You get what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like, there's no difference to me. And so I think if a woman knows what she wants, and she sees something in a man and she wants to pursue that, go, by all means, go for it. Me personally, I don't see anything wrong with it at all. I
But when
don't.
you say pursue, do you mean like chase a man? Like,
Okay, that's a
because
good question.
that's what I think when I think about like, okay, I'm gonna go and get my man's.
Hmm.
Like, am I gonna be what chasing him? Like, it's like trying to be like, hey, hey, like I'm over
I'm
here.
here.
Yeah, like how is that gonna look like? Because when a guy is pursuing a woman, it looks very, like they're trying to like go out with her, they're trying to like, take her out, get to know her, all that whole like consistent stuff. So
Yeah.
how would that look like from a woman?
Okay, that's a great question. And so I'm not speaking from the standpoint that a woman needs to just kind of like be thirsty, like, and what I mean by that is like she's like constantly just nagging at this dude. Okay, think about it like this from a guy's perspective. If a guy's pursuing you, what would be some things that you're like, okay, this is just like a turn off. Like, this is not cool. Like, what would that look like? If what would be annoying to you?
If he's like messaging me consistently and I'm not responding and I'm not
Right.
interested.
If you're not interested, right?
If I'm
Okay,
not
so I mean, I
interested and
think
I
it'd
leave him
be
on red.
I think it's the same thing. Like, I feel like if a girl, I'm not saying for a girl to constantly hit a dude and he's not responding, like, no, sis, like, that ain't it, like,
Mhm.
but if there's an attraction there, these people in the same circle, and maybe a guy, sometimes sometimes men just don't notice it. You get what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Sometimes the man can be a bit shy.
Mhm.
People think that men are monolithic, like we're just natural, just you know quote unquote
Mhm.
the pursuer, just go machismo and things like that. But no, you got some guys that are a little bit more reserved, more introvert, and things like
Mhm.
that. Me personally, I was always a pursuer, but
Mhm.
I don't see anything wrong with that, like,
Mhm.
me
Whichever
personally.
way. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
think it's
again, it's
both. Yeah.
yeah,
I think it's both, but I think also traditionally, I think that's still in the back of my head,
of
like that a man
course.
should pursue me. So at least I don't think I would pursue a man.
Hmm.
However, like if people do, I don't see anything wrong with it. Do you get what I'm saying? Like I think it's
Yeah,
like as long as it's like not chase to beg or like chase, like you're
exactly.
going after a man. That's very different than I feel like maybe like you guys are friends and you guys like like and maybe you're trying to like see like hey like so I like you like to like
Exactly.
let him know like those initiate something. I think
Yeah.
that that's more what I see as like pursuing or opening a door for like, okay, this can
Yeah.
go somewhere
A
else.
scenario like that. Because think about it. Think about a lot of the traditions that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't always follow tradition.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes we think that tradition is like gospel. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it just happened to be someone who probably one day said, hey, this should happen. You get what I'm saying? But I think in that situation, it's not a right or wrong, but you know, yeah, if you want to, girl, shoot your shot.
Yes.
Shoot your shot.
So what do you think is the biggest misconception of men? So when I did the poll, it was all men are not emotional, all men don't want to commit, and all men just want one thing. And the top answers were all men don't want to commit, and all men just want one thing. So those were like the two biggest misconceptions that people said that they were. What do you think?
That is a pretty big misconception. And I don't believe that all men are monolithic where they don't all want to commit. I believe when a man knows what he wants, he's going to go after it and he's going to pursue it and he's going to make sure that, that thing stays together, and so I don't believe that to be true that all men don't want to commit.
What do you think that would be reasons why like a guy can fear commitment? Do you think that it's like upbringing, the way that they saw things? Like, do you think that it's society? Like when other people see people in marriages and they're like, oh, like that's like
Yeah.
being in jail, or that's like that doesn't even work. Like what are reasons that you think that guys wouldn't want to commit?
Yeah, I think that's several factors. I think from my conversations with a lot of the guys, um, and whether it be friends or people that I've worked with, some men honestly do not see the difference between being together in a relationship and being married. As
Mm,
crazy as that sound. And the responses that I've gotten from some men is that marriage is just a piece of paper
mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean anything. What difference is it if I love her, if we live together, and things like that? And so people just cohabitate and they feel like that is enough. And so you got some aspects of men that they believe that to be true. I think another reason is that men have also seen poor marriages growing up, whether it be in their households and things like that. And so that may have been something that kind of turned them off. I believe also society plays a huge role. And so for some men, they don't want to take it to that next step of marriage because they feel comfortable within the relationship.
Mm.
And they feel comfortable because the woman has allowed them to feel comfortable.
Okay, say more. What
Okay,
makes them
so
comfortable?
okay. So if a man is with a woman for several years, right? And she has no ring or anything like that. Again, I feel like every case is scenario because I do feel like, sometimes finances may play a part of it, and a man feels like, if I'm gonna do this, like I want to make sure that I'm prepared. I don't just want to jump into this, and some guys are still kind of finding themselves, and so I don't want to just generalize it, but from the aspect of men being comfortable, a woman who doesn't set boundaries, a woman who, just allows that to happen, a man sometimes sees that as, or a woman will end up setting herself to just kind of be walked on.
Mm.
And so there's been many times where it's just like, he's gotten so comfortable just kind of how things are, he doesn't feel a need to. And so I think another thing to kind of go with that is like what is the conversations like within the relationship? You get
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? Because you would like to think that every relationship they talk about these things and clear expectations, but a lot of the times that's not the case. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
the times it's just kind of going with the flow. And so, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm putting this on a woman. Like, no, I'm not. You get what I'm saying? I'm just naming different scenarios. I think part of it also is like, were you guys clear on your communication on what you want this to be?
Mm.
You know? And so, were you clear with your expectations? Hey, I don't want to just be living together. I do one day want to be married. Is that a conversation that has happened? And if it is, what are the steps being taken? you know it's been 5 years, dude. You know what I'm saying? Where's you get what I'm saying? Like, are we
Mm.
are we trying to do this? Like, and so if a woman doesn't you know create those boundaries, and and is clear on that, then a man is just going to kind of remain comfortable in that. And that's
Mhm.
for some men. Again, others it might just be, you know, finances, the pressure of that, and witnessing poor marriages, and so it's a fear for some men. I mean, think about it. When you look at movies, right? Why did I get married? Or or we
Mhm.
read books, or like comedies and stuff like that, and think like a man, and you see the Kevin Hart character and his wife, and how toxic that marriage is, and
Mhm.
like whether we realize it or not, we laugh at it, but it's like a man looks at that and he's like, man, I don't want to be there. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Or they talk to their friends who are going through a marital crisis, and it's just like, oh my God, where someone probably got married because they felt pressured by a woman to get married, or they felt pressured by, you know, their peers to get married, and they thought it was a thing, and they're realizing, oh man, this is not what I expected it to be. And
Mhm.
so that kind of scares some people off to getting married or to wanting to commit to that level. I know a
Mhm.
lot of couples with that, they've been together for years, and they don't want to get married, or the guy doesn't want to get married. And and
But he
so
loves her, like he wants to be with her, or like he's like is just because that's I think the big question for a lot of girls, which actually I had some questions about that. That girls were like, what if he doesn't commit after many, many years, but he says he loves the woman and he's like he just wants to go with the flow. Like so
mhm,
like does that mean that he's like still seeing his options because he doesn't know that that's the one? Like meaning like that's the one that he wants to
mhm,
have his life with, or do you think it's just like he genuinely might just be scared, like fearful or like just want to take it slow, even though it's been so long.
yeah, it can be that sometimes, where a guy has company, but he doesn't necessarily want the commitment aspect of it, but he wants the benefits from it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's all relationships, but for some, that might be the case, where it's just like he just kind of wants the person around, but he doesn't want to necessarily take it to that next level. And in that aspect, my advice to the woman would be, hey, like you don't have to go through that. You don't have to deal with that. And so that's one of those moments where it's just like, okay, like you gotta give yourself mentally a time frame.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? And because you can tell him something and he can modify his behavior, but the reality is you're not going to be able to change a man or what he wants to do. That has to come from him.
I agree. And so the second question was, do you think a guy knows when like he wants to marry someone?
I believe so. I believe so. I knew that I wanted to marry Steph because like I felt like our purpose was aligned. uh, she just brought so much joy to my life. She's awesome, she's amazing. uh, I already kind of went through that phase where I was just kind of like, all right, I knew what it was to kind of live the single life, be out there, whatever, play around, play games and stuff like that. And so I was in a place in my life where I'm just like, all right, I've done that. I really want to settle down. This is a great girl. She loves me. I love her. And, you know, family oriented and just a lot of qualities that she carried. You know, she was a strong woman, knew what she wanted, independent. Guys say they want independent, but then when they get independent, they're a little intimidated by that. But I wasn't. And so she was a strong woman, could think for herself, smart, brilliant, funny. And so, again, I think one of the biggest things is that, not only our purpose, but our values were the same too. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had a lot of deep conversations and expectations. And so for me, I knew that I was ready to settle down and really be committed to this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very important from relationships is having like the same values and the other personality traits, those other things are like an addition to your life. Like they're the strengths that you maybe have weaknesses in and that balances out. What are your thoughts when it comes to the other misconception of all men just want one thing, which is of course sex, which we all know that we are, yes, we are sexual beings, right? We are,
Right.
but like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like you said, we all are sexual beings. We all are sexual beings, but I don't believe that all men just want one thing. I think in our nature at our core, there are four things that we all long for. We want a sense of belonging. We want someone to love. We want to be loved by someone, and we need something to do, purpose, a life project. And so at our core, I believe, these are things that we need. Again, a sense of belonging, someone to love, to be loved by someone, and something to do. And who doesn't want those things? But not I wouldn't say that. I don't think that's the biggest misconception, because there's a lot of guys that is one thing that they do want.
'Cause everybody wants it initially, but maybe that's not like the whole focus, right? That's what you're trying to say.
Right, because again, that kind of goes back to society as well, because it's like men are championed multiple partners that you sleep with, and women are shamed.
Mm,
And
that's
so
right.
maybe initially, like you said, that might be one of those things. It's kind of hard not to think about as a man, like just being honest. You think about it quite often. But yeah, and I think it's one of those things, because it's been championed so much. It's just kind of one of those things that is ingrained. You see it in movies, you see it in the music videos, you hear it in conversations, and it's okay for a man to do. But then on the flip side, if a woman does it, she's shamed and she's labeled, and it's just
Mhm.
like, be ladylike, be modest, be this, be that. And it's a double standards. It's a double
Mhm.
standard, but we live in a world where there's so many double standards. So
Mhm. Yeah, on the biggest misconceptions of men, I definitely feel like the whole committed one is, I like what you pointed out on that. And then that all men just want one thing. I think that it also depends on the guy. And because I've known guys that like at 20, they were like ready and they got married and they have been in relationships, like in a
hmm
marriage, and it's worked out like for them. And like they value marriage. Like they don't see that as like as something that they're missing out. And then about men just want one thing, I think that the initial attraction to a woman is that, but I think that that's also the woman's place of either like, making it not about that, and not making it so like, like you hear about like the 90-day rule, you hear about like all these things, because the initial feelings that you have when you first meet someone, like that chemistry, is it goes away, and if you have sex or you have those interactions in the immediate time, that does blur a lot of things when it comes to the relationship from a guy's perspective and a girl's. I've known multiple women that have told me that like right after they slept with someone, it changed like completely. Like
hmm
like
hmm
the guy just like went. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what happens in a guy's brain that like all of a sudden that once you sleep with them, it's like, well, no more chase.
Put me on the
I'm
hot
done.
seat. Yeah. When two individuals have sex, typically a lot of the times the woman gets emotionally involved or connected, where the guy is just like, it's just like whatever for him. But kind of long term down the line, that does have a huge impact,
Mm,
and soul ties, and emotional baggage that they both carry, from each other. And think about it like this: like, you sleep with one person who slept with one person, you're carrying all of that emotional baggage, and things like that. And so it's not good at all. And I know that society says, well, it's just sex, and it's just whatever. And so, sex is a beautiful thing. It was designed, um, by God. It is a beautiful thing. But my belief is that it should be through the confinements of marriage. And so, did I follow that growing up? No, I did not. But that turnaround, that had effects on me, that
mhm.
did leave an impact, and that did have it did have an effect on me, and just my mindset and things like that. And so I think sometimes what happens with when that does happen between a man and woman, and they do have sex, kind of going back to what we were talking about prior, a guy is just kind of like championed, and he feels good about himself, his ego and things like that, and he can easily just kind of check out. And the girl is just left there because she was being vulnerable, she was opening up. For her, it was more than just a physical act, but there was emotions tied to it, where the guy is just like, it's whatever. And so
Yeah. But I think there was a book that I read that was talking about oxytocin and how that's a hormone released that actually is proven to, that's actually the same chemical that attaches a baby to the mother. So like that whole attachment is actually the same hormone that is during, like when you reach climax, is the
Mm-hmm.
same hormone that's released during sexual intercourse. So that actually is proven. So even people that say that it's just sex, it's actually proven facts that they've done studies about that that's actually true, that it is an attachment that happens during sex. So as much as you might not believe in soul ties or all these other things, there are things that kind of attach you, and that's why you kind of still feel like like I don't know, it's maybe a longing. I don't know what the right word would be. Like, towards the closeness to that person, even
Absolutely.
after, that happens. And especially in women, I mean, from a woman's perspective, it does. And I've spoken to other women that like feel like, okay, but like after that, things changed. But it's just because like our emotional, that just makes us feel more emotionally close to the man, because that's such an intimate thing and like so vulnerable. And I know guys can feel that too, but I think that that is also what you see in movies, like we talked about earlier. Like you see that it's like guys like really don't care, so then we think that that's the case.
Yeah. When we talk about, individuals having sex, or, why does a guy cheat, if his situation, his relationship is so great with a woman, because that happens too, whereas like a guy could be in a relationship with a woman, they are sexually active, and the guy step out and cheat. And then the question is like, but why? And the girl feels
Mm-hmm.
like, well, why? Why you do that? I was vulnerable. Was I not good enough? And things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And there can be several reasons to why a man cheats. There's several things, and I'll call them symptoms, because I believe at the core it's something else. But some of the symptoms might be, you know, a guy falls out of love, quote unquote, falls out of love. I don't think you can fall in or fall out of anything. I think it's something you do grow in. Love is something that you grow in. A man might cheat for variety. He wants to see, he wants to have sex with multiple girls and be with multiple girls, and the excitement that kind of comes with that. Um, Sometimes a man might feel neglected, emotionally neglected or things like that. That's why he might. And again, these are just symptoms. Situational. A situation happens. Maybe two people got drunk or something like that, and something happens. For some dudes, it's getting even. Maybe their girl cheated on them, and so they're like, you know what, I'm gonna get you back, and so I'm gonna get even. For some guys, it might be to boost their self-esteem. Kind of like I was talking about how a guy's champion, sometimes it's out of anger, or they just don't feel committed to the relationship at all, or it's just that sexual desire that we all have, because we all we're sexual beings. I think the core, at its core reason, though, the reason why guys cheat, the reason why girls cheat, is that we are emotionally used to we emotionally use people to feel the loneliness that we carry.
Mm-hmm.
We emotionally use people to feel the loneliness that we carry. Again, like I was stating before, like at our core, we want a sense of belonging, someone to love, to be loved by someone, and something to do. There's a void in each and every one of us. And so the moment that we feel alone, it's a temptation to step out. And so that's why people can be together for years, married for years, or in a relationship for years. And it's just like, I can't believe that he did that. Is because they're looking to fill a void of loneliness, whether
And
it's an
someone.
emotional cheating
Yeah.
or physical, whatever, and they're looking to fill that void. And so I think at its core, that's what it is. Like we emotionally use people to fill in the loneliness that we carry. Like, you ever been around a bunch of people in a group, at a party, at a hangout, and you still feel alone? And
Mm-hmm.
isn't it interesting that we live in the most connected era, social media, all these things, friends, followers, all of this, yet we're more lonelier than ever.
Mm.
We're more
That's
lonelier
right.
than ever. And so I think, there's a void that we each carry, and we try to find it in different things. And so that's why people are addicted to things. And so we sometimes find it hard to feel to speak about our addictions, because we sometimes fixate ourselves on the act and not the pain that the addiction is seeking to soothe. You get what I'm saying? And so when we talk about addiction, it's basically our attempt to, relieve ourselves from the pain that we have, that's sometimes unbearable for us. And so for some people that might be food, for others that might be pornography, for others that might be sex or technological distractions and all of these things. And so the moment that everything becomes overwhelming, we go to these vices and we need it as an outlet. So check this out. We've proved that for survival purposes, we can go to things to soothe that pain. We're just going about it in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's very, very true. So even when that question of, because I've heard that so many times about like cheating, it's like it's more an internal issue. It's not about the other person. Like that's a symptom, like what you were just saying,
Absolutely.
of that loneliness or void that someone may feel on both sides, because cheating and stuff is on both sides. But coming from a guy's perspective, that's good that you said that. It's true. It's like whatever void, they go to something. So that might be a reflection of what's going on the inside of them that you can't change or you can't fill either. So even if
Mm-hmm.
you were the most amazing woman and someone cheated on you, I mean, I always say this, if Beyonce got cheated on, then
Oh my
what about
God.
all of us? No, I'm kidding.
Those memes were crazy, man.
I know. It's insane. But you know, like people have in this culture, like you see that happen and you know, it does hurt, or, you know, you see that fall of, you know, because we're all human. But in reality, it is a symptom, like how you said, and it's something
Yeah.
internally. So,
Yeah. Our addiction is basically our best attempt to survive.
mhm,
And so if that's cheating
to
for someone, then
numb.
I know that sounds crazy to say, but like when you look at it, like for what it is, it's just like whatever it is just like it's an attempt to survive. You're just going about it in the wrong way. You're going about it the wrong way to fill that void.
That's not as healthy, and it has its own consequences towards you. You know, like, and it's like your own consequences that you're causing yourself. Not even, well, yes, maybe for the other person in that situation, but mostly that's all for yourself. That's why. What do you think about men seeking out, like how you're saying, like either talking to other men, maybe therapy? I know that that's something that a lot of men feel weird about, and I've
Mm-hmm.
talked to some men that are kind of like, "What? Like I'm fine. What do you mean?" What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm so pro advocate for therapy. I actually have a therapist that I go to at least once a month. I think it's a little bit difficult for a lot of men to kind of share their emotions because think about it. Imagine being a certain way for 28 years and then now someone's telling you now imagine 29 years of just kind of dealing with your own problems, not having a really anyone to talk to about it, not your parents or anything like that. You just kind of Googled everything. And now you're telling me that I need to open up in front of this stranger. Like, no, that's going to take some time. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think in relationships that from a guy's perspective, uh, when it comes to that, I think women need to have a little bit more grace and patience when it comes to that. Like you can't expect a man to just open up because he's with you and he's spent his whole life bottling things up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fair to a man. It's really unrealistic expectations to have for a man to just open up if he's never done that. And I sometimes feel like women look at men as projects and we are not projects. Like a woman might look at a man and say, oh, they notice some red flags and they say to themselves, well, I can fix that. I can fix him.
Guilty.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can fix that. And so and the reality is that that's not true because sometimes people look at it, they're like, well, if a guy and a girl love each other, why can't they make it work? Shouldn't love be enough? And I'm like, love is a part of it, but that is not the ultimate like solution to it. You get what I'm saying?
Mm,
Love by itself is not going to make an individual fight for something, especially if that situation is toxic. When
mm,
you look at through wisdom literature, Solomon, he makes an analogy that I think is just hilarious, but it's so true. And he says that, I'd rather live on the corner of a roof than to be in a home with a quarrelsome wife. And so
mm.
he's basically saying like men don't want that drama. Like we don't want that headache and
The
that
nagging.
back and forth, the nagging, the arguing and things like that. It's already challenging as it is to be a man. And again, I'm not saying that it's not challenging to be a
All
woman because
right.
I can
All
feel I
right.
can feel them claws
We
coming out.
can
I'm not saying that at all,
You're
but
talking to the wrong person.
and I'm just it's just but love by itself is not gonna not going to do that. And so, sometimes, females look at a man like a as a project because of what they see in movies and because of what they read in books, and this is how a man should be. And then men are put on such a high pedestal, and then the moment that they disappoint a woman, he's he's canceled, he's dismissed, he's vilified, he's all of these name calling and all of that. And it's like, no man is perfect. What you see in that movie, my girl, my sister, like, no, that is not true. Like, no, like, he was a great actor, he really was, but that is not true. You're not gonna find a perfect man. Like, you're
Yeah.
not gonna find a perfect man at all.
Mm.
And I think oftentimes when women look at men as their project, like, oh, I see the potential there, and potential is great, but you also have to pay attention to the patterns that you see. And so if there's certain red flags, address those things, and you got to be willing to ask yourself, okay, what am I willing to deal with? And because ultimately the change has to come from him.
Mm-hmm.
Like a guy can modify his behavior, but if that change doesn't generally come from him, then you're going to find yourself back in a continuous cycle of toxic fighting and all of that. And you don't want that. Who wants to be in a toxic relationship? No relationship is perfect, but you at least want to be able to just coexist with someone and be their friend. I think that's the beauty of a relationship, when you can have someone that you love and care for, and they're also a friend.
Mm-hmm. And that's what builds a good foundation of a relationship, is like that friendship. Well, the last time that we hung out actually at my house, we were talking about that not every man, like sometimes we read so many books and movies and that like puts an expectation, but sometimes it's possible that that person is just not, hasn't either learned how to deal with a relationship, has their own beliefs about a relationship because of what they saw, is maybe not emotionally capable at the moment until they learn to like for example, like the love languages. Like we
Mm-hmm.
talked about, like, if you're physical touch, but they never hugged their family members their whole life, and then you
Right.
expect someone to like be hugging you all the time, or words of affirmation, but they were never affirmed growing up, and then you expect them to always be encouraging and all those things. I think that you can learn those things, but like how you said, like I think we are, I've been guilty of that, that it's like you expect them to be like you, or you expect them to be like, well, I'm working on these things, so then you need to like, I'm going through counseling, so then why don't you go to counseling, why don't you get help, why don't you read these books then, like
Yeah.
why don't you and like it comes off as nagging, or like, because you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to like change the person, and it's like instead it's like seeing, and this is not talking about like red flags, I'm talking more about like when you're actually like going through a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it's just that they just haven't learned those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For everyone's in a different journey and walking their life, you know, because a guy could then turn back and say, well, why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? Why don't you? And so again, it kind of goes back to just kind of having grace for one another and just kind of giving people their space to grow, because we're all, and that's part of a relationship. You help one another, but you don't want to nag or force someone to do something that they themselves may not be ready for. And I think that happens a lot in relationships where the guy is kind of pressured to do all of these things and be all of these things, and it's just like he's still trying to learn his emotional vocabulary. He doesn't he can't decide when he's mad or sad. He's trying to figure all of that out, and then you're throwing all of this on top of him. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta it takes work. It takes work, and it takes two people that are willing.
Mm-hmm. To make it
So
work.
to
I
make it
like
work.
that. I like that. So I had two questions about what guys look for in a woman, like qualities, and then what makes a woman stand out from the rest. We know that guys are like physical creatures. We know that like they are attracted to someone, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we know that. Like, okay,
That's a
that's the
fact.
first initial thing. But
Mm-hmm.
aside from that, what are things that make a woman a quality woman, I would say, that stand out?
Okay, so I think one thing that is really big is confidence. A
Mm,
woman who is confident, that is so attractive. When a woman is confident in who she is, and what she wants. And so I think someone who is funny, like dudes, we love to laugh.
mm,
We love to laugh. And so For me, someone who is funny, someone who's smart as well. Because when, you can have someone who's physically attractive, but if the conversation is dull or you don't have anything to talk about, then it's just like and so
Mm-hmm.
definitely someone who is smart, someone a female also with a sense of purpose, who knows what she wants and she's gonna go and get it. She's not sitting there with her hands out, not looking to just be along the ride, but no, she knows what she wants. That is a very attractive quality. Also a woman who values herself, who knows her worth and things like that. And like that for me, those things right there are great qualities in a woman that would make her more attractive.
Would you say your friends like think the same way? Like guys around in your space, all like if you break that down, it's the same.
No, because I think every guy's different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what would you
Yeah,
say?
yeah,
I just am curious. What are other things that
yeah.
make women stand out then? If it's not those things, 'cause I agree with you. I think
I
that
think
confidence. Those things.
I think another thing is drama free.
Mm,
Drama free. Like no guy wants drama. No guy wants, you know, a girl who's just always wants to fight and pick fights. And so you want a peace of mind. And so that's definitely important. What are some other things that kind of come to my mind? Uh,
like independent, like how you're
Independent for
saying.
sure.
How
Yeah.
about like financially?
Oh,
Like,
yes.
is
Yeah,
that
that's great.
because
That's great.
the biggest misconception that I feel like women have, and now like in my 20s, like I definitely have that like pushed and told to me. It's like about finding a guy that has a lot of money, or like finding someone that's so like someone to take care of me. But then it's
Hmm.
like, but like I want to make my own money though. Like I want to have my own stuff. Like I don't want someone to take,
Absolutely.
again, every woman is different. There's some women that like literally want to be like, at home taking care of the kids, like
And nothing
that.
wrong with
And
that.
there's nothing exactly like I'm not
Yeah.
saying that. It's more of like what I personally have seen, that's kind of like that. Every woman's trying to get someone to take care of her. And I'm like, but like, what if a woman's like, has her own stuff, like isn't that better, so like meaning for like me personally. So this is my own personal opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, yeah, it's not a right or a wrong. It just is. Me
Mm-hmm.
personally, though, that's something that I found very attractive about Steph was that she had her own. I think for me personally, like let's make this empire even bigger. You got
Mm-hmm.
your own thing, I got my own thing, and I think it's great. I think that's attractive. Like a woman with ambition, a woman who knows what she wants, and she got goals that she's gonna do, and she's gonna be able to help you. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And she's busy in her own world. Like she has her own stuff that she's doing
Right. Yeah, and I think that leads to another point. A woman who has her own identity, she doesn't lose herself.
in the
She doesn't
relation.
lose herself in the relationship. You get what I'm saying? Like
Mm,
she's still an individual.
mm,
And so a man is just an addition to her life, but he doesn't fulfill her. Your fulfillment doesn't come from another individual. You
mm-hmm.
get what I'm saying? They should be an addition. They bring a compliment to you, but that person shouldn't fill you. Like no person can fill your void. And so a
Mm-hmm.
woman who has her own identity and has her own voice, yes, that now I'm thinking about more things. Like you have your
Yeah.
own voice and you think the way you think and don't agree with everything that a man says. Like no, like challenge that. Like I for me that I love that. The
Mm-hmm.
mind, and just being able to have those deep conversations and you know being pushed back on some of my views and making me aware of things that maybe I may not have been aware of as a man,
Mm-hmm.
and
That
challenging me to
challenge.
think and keeping me on my toes. I find that to be sexy. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. See here, ladies, that's what the men are looking for. Confident, bold, outspoken, have your own identity. And we actually talked about this in a previous episode about how women cannot lose themselves. So definitely go back to that episode if you need to listen to that, because I think a lot of women end up like trying to be what they think that the man wants you to be.
Hmm.
And I think that that's something that you have to learn and like practice. It's like no, I'm my individual by myself. And I am whole by myself. And I am like, I will continue doing this stuff even when this person's in my life, not like I change my whole life and schedule just because this guy's in my life. So, and the confidence thing, very, very important. Wrapping up with the questions that people asked. So it's, what is the best way to communicate effectively to your partner when you feel like you want to get your point across, but not get defensive? So like you want to be communicating effectively with a
Mm.
man.
Okay, so Steph and I do this thing called fair fighting, and so okay, whenever there's a disagreement and you both feel strongly on something, I think never do it in public and never do it in front of people. That's those things seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how many couples I just run into just kind of having an argument. And then sometimes they'll try to bring a family member or a friend. Oh, what do you think? No, don't do that. You know why? Because you're in a relationship with that individual, and so, and be mindful of who you give access to of your relationship. Like, especially, it's already hard enough sometimes for men to open up. It's even harder sometimes when a man knows his business is just kind of being put out there. And so make sure if you are talking to someone that there's someone that is someone who's gonna champion you both and is not just championing you as the female. Because oftentimes when girls look for advice, they're looking for the advice that they come from is someone who's rooting for them, but not necessarily rooting for the relationship. And so you got to be very careful in that. And that goes both ways. But I think it should never be done in public or in private. I think if one or both of you is extremely upset and you need to take time to just kind of cool off and come back, set a time for that. If a man says he doesn't want to talk at the moment, give him the space he needs.
So not be like, but like, can you talk now?
No,
But like, I need
that
to
is
like, I can't fall asleep unless we fix it.
no. You're gonna drive a man crazy.
I
So,
have.
so you gotta
My
give him.
own
Yeah, you gotta give him that space. Now
Mhm.
it's funny that you mentioned that, right? Because in my relationship with Steph, I'm usually the pursuer
Mm.
if there's an issue. And so early on in our relationship, I would want to handle it. Let's just talk about this before the day's over with. And I would push and push, and then she would just kind of pull away. And so what I've learned and what helped me, and what could help you, is that okay, if you don't want to talk right now, give me a day and a time that we're going to talk, so we can meet up and talk. That way they're getting the space that they want, and you have assurance that this is going to be discussed and you're going to have that conversation. Because if it's just like that time is not set there for you all to have that conversation, then you're kind of left in the dark. And so I think that's important to just kind of set a time to talk. And then when you guys actually talk, I think, actively listen.
Mm.
Sometimes, and this is not based on gender, it could be the guy or the girl, but sometimes people, when they argue, and they're listening, they're just listening to respond instead of listening to actively listening. And so one of the ways that you can actively listen, an example would be if you're going through it and you're arguing, is repeating what that person said. So for example, so what you're telling me is you were upset at the fact that blank. You get what I'm saying? And so is that correct? And then them telling you, yep, that's what I said, or no, that's not what I said. And so I think oftentimes when people fight, it's just like, or they argue, it's just both people going at each other. No one's really actively listening to hear from each other, and we're making the assumptions. And when we are unaware or things are unknown, we never fill it with positives. We fill the unknown with negativity. And so we assume, and so we make absolute statements. You always do this, or you always do that. And it's like, no, they don't always do that. No one wants to be
Mhm.
accused of always doing something and making something so concrete. And so avoiding
That's
absolute
good.
statements when
Yeah.
you're arguing and having those things, and just actively listening to one another. And sometimes you might be so strong on an opinion where you both just agree to disagree.
I saw this quote today that said, "It's not that communication is the key to a healthy relationship. It's understanding where each
Mm,
other is coming from and understanding and listening to what they're saying that is
That's
the most
good.
effective. And I was like, wow, that's kind of true. I always say communication is important, but it's true. It's like, but I felt like sometimes I've communicated stuff and I still feel not understood.
Yeah. You feel
So
misunderstood. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that that's more frustrating than
Yeah.
communicating, because then people stop communicating because they're like,
Yeah.
well, I'm just saying what I need. That person is not getting it.
Yeah.
So I think it's understanding and trying to, I think you guys have told me that a lot. It's like, it's not trying to get to like who wins. Like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
point of fighting and then you lose the relationship or you lose
Right.
each
Win the
other?
argument, but yet you lose the person. Yeah.
There you go.
And so along with that, like you said, the understanding aspect and just not bringing up old things as well. Like if you guys discuss something and it's been settled, like why bring it back up?
Mm.
And so that's a real trigger for a dude. To bring up old stuff, or to compare the relationship to someone else's or
Mm-hmm.
something that you've seen. It's just like, no, they're not in this relationship. It's you and me. And so
Yeah.
just being mindful of that. And that can go both ways. That's not gender specific either, but just
Mm-hmm.
kind of from a guy's point of view.
Yeah, honestly, I love this conversation. I feel like we talked about so much, and I feel like we can talk even more about
For real, we need a
so
part
many
two.
issues. Seriously. But what is one last thing that you feel like you would want a woman to know, when it comes to relationships or maybe understanding a man better or of everything that we talked about today?
I would want women to understand and take from this conversation that not all men are not monolithic. We're not all the same. Have realistic expectations. Don't put men on a pedestal. Men are definitely imperfect. Men are not mind readers.
Mm,
Men are not mind readers. But most of all, something that women should know is that your fulfillment doesn't come from an individual.
mhm,
It is my belief that your fulfillment, purpose, it all comes from God, our
mhm.
creator. Um, I would also just encourage women to realize that men are not all monolithic either. We don't all think the same. There's probably going to be some men that listen to this podcast and think that I'm bugging and they don't agree with me at all, but that's
Yeah.
okay because, this is just my perspective.
So yeah, so I love that you were like really raw and like real today. So I feel like a lot of women are probably like, okay, like that was another, I like that. Like, because I feel like we assume or we think that we know a lot of because of what either we hear, and all of that. So it's good to hear it from a guy directly. So
Absolutely. Thank
thank
you
you for
again.
being a part of it. So where can people connect with you, your podcast? Like, what's your handle?
Absolutely. So I'm on all social media platforms at Jun Marcelin, JunMarcelin, on Twitter, Instagram, social media. And we also, like I said earlier, we do have a podcast called Moments with the Marcelins. And so we are on all streaming platforms for podcasts. And so you can check us out there.
Yes.
And yeah.
Every what?
Every Wednesday. We drop an episode every Wednesday. And so, yeah, come check us out.
Yeah, go check them out. They're a couple. They talk about a lot of really good topics. And thank you so much, June. I really appreciate it. And I know that you have brought some insight to some people today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity and can't wait to have you on ours.
So this conversation was really fun to do. Thank you so much for tuning in on this week's episode. And as always, make sure to subscribe to this podcast, share with someone that you think will gain insight from this podcast, share it with a friend, and make sure to leave a review. That really helps me out to let me know what kind of episodes you like, what you like to hear on this podcast, and just stay tuned for. And again, thank you so much for the support. Make sure to follow me at Elizabeth Sabby. And as always, I will see you guys next week on this podcast. Have a great week.